For this broadcast of A Fresh Start, you are going to hear part of the first sermon my dad preached the following Sunday after he left a successful pastorate in November 2008 and stepped out in faith to form what is now Back to the Basics Ministries and to begin airing a Fresh Start TV program the first week of November 2009. The title of the message is When God Says Go and is centered on the life of Jonah. You will hear the disastrous results of what happens when God says go and you don't go. But our God is a God of second chances and so much more. And you will also hear the blessings that come when God says go and you go. On this broadcast, you will hear one part of the 3 parts of the message, which are shown over 3 programs.
Told the story about the first time he kissed Sandy. He said he hadn't done that. He said he did tell the story about the first time how they met. But I found this out later on. But I didn't know Mike and Sandy when they were in college at Union. Of course, I went to University of Tennessee, graduated in '74, a little bit older than Mike. But when he was on campus there at Union University, good Baptist college, Mike was going to be a preacher. He had met Sandy, and he was really trying to work up the courage to kiss her. And he asked some of the guys in the dorm about it. He said, "This is the night. I'm going to do it." Well, they knew that he would try to meet up with her each night after dinner, and they'd sit under a tree and kind of talk together. So one of his buddies decided he was going to get in on whatever happened that night. So Mike did not know this, but this friend of his had climbed up in the tree. And so he was up there above him, and so sure enough, Mike and Sandy came down, and they sat together under the tree, and Mike wanted to act very spiritual. So he said, "Sandy, I feel like praying." She said, "Well, go ahead, Mike." He said, "Father, Father, up above, shall I kiss the one I love?" And about that time, this voice said, "Sinner, sinner, down below, pucker up and let her go." So that is the true story about Mike and Sandy's first kiss. So right there at Union University. If you have your Bibles, if you would, turn to the book of Jonah. Jonah, Micah, Nahum, Habakkuk, Zephaniah, Haggai, Zechariah, Malachi. I don't know if your pastor has preached through this book before. I don't know. Dr. Edgman may have preached on it this morning. But this is a brand new sermon for me. God gave it to me in the past few days. It's what I call a recliner sermon. We were taught in seminary, you get commentaries and you look at the commentaries and you pray and you choose books of the Bible that you want to preach through, and a lot of things that are part of the preparation of preaching a sermon. But this is one that just sitting at my recliner watching football, which you can do about any night of the week now. Or I've never been hunting in my life, but I love to watch the Hunting Network and some of those programs. But God gave me a new message. You see, at 57 and a half years of age, I'm in a new phase of my life. The only other time, and this is the spiritual irony of how God works, the only other time in my life as a married man with children that I was unemployed or facing unemployment when I was on staff with Mike Boyd as his youth minister there in Memphis. And it wasn't because I got fired or Mike and I didn't get along. But I had gone to seminary part-time at a program at Union on Mondays, gotten about 63 hours of a 90-something hour degree, and knew that I would have to do some on-campus work. But God had moved us to Memphis, and as Mike said, we had a great ministry there at Boulevard. He was 33 years old. I was 35, 36, somewhere in there. Our education minister was 35. You know, that's very unusual today. You just don't see a lot of young church staffs like that. And God began to deal with me about preaching. Mike and Sandy had bought a home in area of Memphis, good way from the church, but wasn't hard to get to the church from their house. And I remember we had David Ring in revival, and Jay McKay, that was John McKay's son, did the music. And the last night of the revival, we decided, or Mike and Sandy invited the revival team and the staff and a few others in the church to come out to their home. So we were all together that night and had a good time together. And I remember, and if anyone's familiar with Memphis, unless you're familiar with Memphis, this won't make any difference to you, but I remember coming back from the Boyd's house, and we were going back to our home there near the Memphis Mall at the time. And I was in front of a Hyundai dealership, and God spoke to me as clearly as I've ever heard. I believe God speaks. He has His verbal voice that you hear, others may not hear. He has His scriptural voice where He'll speak to you through a scripture passage. And then He has His circumstantial voice where He speaks to you through circumstances. But that night, we were driving in front of that Hyundai dealership, and I heard the Lord say, I preached on Proverbs 3:6 a lot at the time when I got to preach, and He said, do you really believe Proverbs 3:6? That I want you to resign as youth minister, and I want you to step out on faith, and I want you to finish your seminary degree, but I've called you to preach, and I want you to preach, and I want you to deal with that. We had 2 children at the time, and I remember mentioning that to Wanda, and several times through that process she would say, now, do you really feel God spoke to you? And a wife ought to do that. You know, we as men, our wives, God will use them to help to confirm things in our life. But I remember in August of 1987, taking that step of faith. The church really did me good at Boulevard for a church at that time, and the love offering and things that people did for us. And I had a retirement account, and I was able to use some of that, and we lived for a few months all off that while I went to seminary full time. But I distinctly remember, no one else heard it, but I remember God speaking to me. One other time, after I had gotten my seminary degree, the master's, I was on staff at my home church in Memphis, Ridgeway Baptist Church. When I left Boulevard, they put me on part-time there to work with the singles. Our ministry began to grow, and I was able to go full-time. The church was booming in those days. They had a facility that, of course, very much like what you have here at Wallace Memorial. It was just built a $3 million gymnasium and all, and we had 33 apartment complexes within a 3-mile radius, scores of singles visiting the church. And I remember that I had gotten my seminary degree and I was going to go preach. And I had my resume out a few places. But I was offered that our family is kind of helping us out financially at the time too. They were buying up houses that bordered the church. And these were nice homes. One was a 5-bedroom house that the pastor had offered for us to live in. There was a gate in the back of it that you opened the gate and you were right there at the parking lot of Ridgeway Baptist Church. You could go from there. Our kids were going to the Briarcrest School that was there, where Miss McNatt was their music teacher at one time. And so, I mean, there they could go to school, go play at the gym. It was our church. The only thing that really would have to do, wanted to occasionally get out and go get groceries. But I can remember again one day driving through the parking lot there. And I so distinctly heard the voice of God say to me, He said, Bobby, I didn't call you to comfort. Because, I mean, we were going to have it pretty good there for a while. And I began to think of that verse, woe to them who are at ease in Zion. And so again, the voice of God spoke to me very clearly. In the first verse of chapter 1 of Jonah, it's very clear that God spoke to Jonah, and He told Jonah something to do. The Bible says, now the word of the Lord came unto Jonah, the son of Amittai, saying, arise, go to Nineveh, that great city, and cry against it, for their wickedness is come up before me. But Jonah rose up to flee unto Tarshish from the presence of the Lord, and went down to Joppa, and he found a ship going to Tarshish, so he paid the fare thereof, and went down into it, to go with them unto Tarshish from the presence of the Lord. And we'll get to this other part in just a moment. I've titled this message tonight, When God Says Go. God had told me to go twice in my life when it didn't seem like circumstantially it was necessarily the best thing to do. Perhaps you've had an experience in your life where God has said go. Well, there are 2 ways to react to that. When God says go and you say no, and when God says go and you say, let's go. Doesn't matter if you wait a while, you're saying no initially. And there'll always be some kind of a price to pay. But here, God had told Jonah to go into the city of Nineveh and preach against it. And then he didn't do it, but thank God later on he did. And I want you to notice there in chapter 3, verse 1, "And the word of the Lord came unto Jonah the second time, saying, Arise, go unto Nineveh, that great city, and preach unto it the preaching that I bid thee. So Jonah arose and went unto Nineveh according to the word of the Lord." When God says go, two things we can do. We can say no, or we can say let's go. Let's first of all look at what happens if we say no when God says go. Well, there are some consequences that you pay as a result of that. And so, the first thing that you have to look at, when you say no to God, you're disobedient. You're living in disobedience to God. The Bible clearly says that there will be blessings for us when we obey God, but we receive the judgment of God when we do not obey Him. And so you're living in disobedience and you deserve the judgment of God, but sometimes God is a good God. Later on, Jonah would actually say over there that chapter 4, verse 2, he said, "I know thou art a gracious God and merciful, slow to anger, and of great kindness." Aren't you thankful God's slow to anger, slow to wrath? That He's a gracious and a merciful God. But see, Jonah deserved the judgment of God. So let's read on there, verse 4. "But the Lord sent out a great wind, a storm into the sea, and there was a mighty tempest in the sea, so that the ship was likely to be broken apart. And the mariners were afraid and cried every man unto his God, and they cast forth their wares that were in the ship into the sea to lighten it. But Jonah," notice this is the third time this word appears, Jonah was gone down into the sides of the ship, and he lay and was fast asleep. Second thing, when God says go and you say no, it's not only that you're living in disobedience and deserve the judgment of God, but the only way to go when you say no to God is down, and you either disable or destroy your personal testimony for Christ. I think so many people I've known through the years where God's touch was on them at some time in their life. But then God told them to do something that got beyond the zone of comfort. Someone has said that we sacrifice to the point of inconvenience. And that's probably true. You know, you think about it. Well, if you're a minister, what are the things we hear the most about from people in our churches on a Sunday if they complain about something? It's not anything that has to do with something spiritual. It's usually, it's too cold in the sanctuary. It's too hot. I didn't like the way y'all had rearranged the seats on the pool. You know, just things like that. It's just amazing. The things that people will sometimes complain about that really don't matter for eternity. But I can tell you this, every time we say no to God, it may not completely destroy our personal testimony, but it can disable it in some way. And I tell you, sometimes we're not known so much for how many words we use that can be in the way of complaints and can really begin as a testimony. The things we say can sometimes cause us to go down. I heard about a monk, or a guy that wanted to be a monk, and it was one of those where you had to take a vow of silence for 3 years. And when he went to this particular monastery, they said, "Now, you've got to go a year without saying anything." And the head monk said, "I'm going to call you in. And when I call you in, you tell me how the first year went. Keep it to as few words as possible." So a year went by, and it came the first time that he stood before the head monk, and he said, "Well, you've been here for 1 year. What do you think?" And he said, "Bed hard." He said, "Okay, I'll see you in another year." So the prospective monk went another year, didn't say a word. Finally, it came to the end of the second year, and he said, "Well, how's your second year gone?" He said, "Food bad." So it finally came to the end of the 3rd year. And he said, well, how's it going? You've been here for 3 years. Are you going to be a monk or not? And he said, I quit. And the head monk said, well, I'm not surprised. You've done nothing but complain since you've been here. And I'm telling you, that's a lot about, we don't necessarily in life sometimes when God is telling us to go and do something, sometimes we will find all the excuses in the world to back off from it and use just really things that aren't very spiritual as excuses to try to tell people why we really don't feel led to do a particular thing. But in the case of Jonah, it says there that he went down to Tarshish or Joppa. He went the farthest place that he could go to get away from going to Nineveh. He went in the opposite direction. And that's the way we are sometimes when God asks us to do something and we don't do it. But then he got to the ship and it said that he went down into the ship. And that's significant. The sailors above him were fighting for their lives. But there he was, the backslidden preacher. Because evidently Jonah was a preacher because God had called him to go to Nineveh. But Jonah was fast asleep down in the ship while others were struggling. And that's what happens to us spiritually. When God says to go and we don't do it, it may not be as drastic the first time. But every time that we do it, it just gets a little easier to the point that even when a storm is going on, and again, you take this figuratively, the storms of life, you just don't care at all. You're down there sleeping when you ought to be up there fighting the fight. Well, a third thing about when God says go and you say no. Let's continue reading on. He was down in the ship, was fast asleep. Verse 6, so the shipmaster came to him and said unto him, what means this, sleeper? Arise, call upon your God, if so be that God will think upon us that we perish not. And they said, every one of the men who was on the ship, come and let us cast lots, that we may know for whose cause this evil has come upon us. So they cast lots, and the lot fell upon Jonah. Then they said unto him, tell us, we pray, for whose cause this evil is upon us? What is your occupation, and where are you from? Where is your country, and who are your people? And Jonah said unto them, I am a Hebrew, and I fear the Lord God of heaven, who made the sea and the dry land. And then the men were exceedingly afraid, and said unto him, why have you done this? For the men knew that he fled from the presence of the Lord, because he had told them. I tell you, that's one of the sad things. When God says go and you say no, even people who aren't saved can sometimes pick up that something's not right in your life. That here, he even admitted that God had told him to do something, but he had refused to do it. And so they said unto him, what shall we do? Verse 11, unto thee, that the sea may be common to us. For the sea wrought and was tempestuous. And Jonah said unto them, take me up and cast me forth into the sea, and so shall the sea be common to you, for I know that for my sake this great storm is upon you. Nevertheless, isn't this something? These pagan sailors still were willing to spare this man's life. And they rowed hard to bring it to the land, but they could not. For the sea was wrought and was tempestuous against them. And so they cried unto the Lord and said, we beseech you, O Lord, we beseech you, let us not perish for this man's life, and lay not upon us innocent blood, for thou, O Lord, hast done as it pleased thee. And they took up Jonah and cast him forth into the sea, and the sea ceased from her raging. Then the men feared the Lord exceedingly, and offered up a sacrifice unto the Lord, and made vows. You know what I believe? Those pagan sailors